Hello, can everybody hear me? Nice and clear. Well, thanks for joining. It's actually more people here than I expected at the end of the second conference day this late, and also considering the big party yesterday. Um, so a quick poll, how many people have built mobile applications with React Native here? So very few. And how many people have built a mobile application with natively with iOS or on Android? Okay, a couple, great. So my name is Marcus. I'm from Sweden, and I currently live and work in Munich. I've been building mobile apps with React Native for the last 3 years plus. I work at Internations, which is the largest expat community with over 3.7 million users. 3 years ago, me and my team were given the challenge to rebuild our mobile app. It was a native app with native controllers, and it rendered some web views, but it was built externally, so we wanted to have more control of it. So the requirements was that the app should be built in-house and have a native feel and look. The team was discussing about to build the mobile app using JavaScript, and there was a lot of technologies at the time to choose between. So PWA was a hot topic, but it had a lot of restrictions back then. It was not as mature. This was also the time when Flow was considered to be the superior tool for statically typed JavaScript, which we all know is not true anymore. TypeScript is obviously the way to go there. So fast forwarding 3 years, and now we have a brand new native iOS and an Android app in the stores, completely powered with React Native. An app that was built in-house, leveraging existing knowledge in the organization, and the app also fulfilled the requirement that it has to feel and look natively, just like some parts of the old app. So another thing that was quite interesting was how I got into native app development then, because I was just building with React Native, had no experience at all with the native side. But we decided to, instead of removing the old app and adding the new app to the store, we integrated the old app with the new React Native app. And then basically just replaced it. So it was a very seamless experience for the user. They never had to download a new app. So I will include a link to a very interesting talk that my colleague did about exactly this journey, and I really recommend you to see it if you're interested. I will provide a link at the end of my talk. So yeah, this whole work with the whole combo code base and integration of the two apps really required each of us, one of us, to get our hands dirty with some native code. So now I would like to talk about some similarities and differences and pros and cons with native versus React Native, and it's all based on my experience. So React Native is an open source mobile application framework that is created by Facebook. It enables developers to write truly native mobile apps using JavaScript or TypeScript. Facebook is themselves using this technology for various of their applications like Instagram, Ads Manager, and I believe the Marketplace as well. The architecture currently looks like this in React Native. Like you have this bridge abstraction, and this will be changed in the future using something called JSI, which is a new JavaScript runtime that the Facebook team is working on, and it will bring new features to React Native and improve the performance. So I think this is really good. I think the future looks brighter for React Native now than it did before these announcements. So there is a couple of new things they will solve with the new architecture that can be a problem with the current architecture. So, for example, every side effect at the moment is handled asynchronously over this bridge because of the nature of the bridge abstraction. But certain side effects you don't want to necessarily to handle asynchronously, like user touch events and so on. You want them to be very responsive and top priority to handle those scenarios. So another thing is also that React Native does not compile to JavaScript. It provides this bridge abstraction that I mentioned to communicate between JavaScript and the native side. And the native side mostly consists of platform APIs and native core modules and custom modules. And the bridge is implemented in C++. So the JavaScript is always executed on something that is called the JavaScript thread. And there is two virtual machines there that can interpret the JavaScript. It's either the JavaScript core or a new engine from Facebook called Hermes, which is only available for Android at the moment. And so this, by separating the JavaScript code in its own thread from the UI, which happens on the main thread, you can keep the app more responsive to user interactions. Because when the JavaScript is very, very busy, the UI can still be computed on the main thread. And it's mostly in very extreme cases that you have some performance issues here. Like if the bridge is very busy serializing the messages that is transferred over the bridge, maybe the payload is too large, or the payload is actually not that large but very frequent, then you can experience some sort of stutter in the UI. So this is just a little peek into how it can look like when you're communicating over the bridge. Like we have a view and we have a text view here, two elements, and we're sending over a payload where we're requesting from the UI manager, which is a custom module that React Native provides that lives on the native side. And we can see that the type is 1, and that means that the message is coming from JavaScript and not the other way around. Then it would have been a 0. And when we create these two elements here on the JavaScript side, the UI manager will be responsible for managing and creating the UI. So this will translate into the native elements on the platform. So in iOS, in this case, for example, it will give us back a UI view or a UI text. So next thing I would like to talk about is product development experience in React Native. So it's cross-platform. It makes it possible to develop a mobile application and target both platforms with a single code base. So by doing so, we managed to cut down developer cost and time for building features, and for both targets, we can just build it simultaneously. And I think when a team and teams can build for both platforms, you can increase the consistency of the look and the feel of the UI, and also how features will behave and also when features will actually be released. You can stay more synchronized. And I think also your product owners will say a big thank you to you, because they don't have to navigate between two departments all the time. Of course, it depends how you structure your mobile engineering teams or organizations. So when you have this cross-functional capability, you can start to get a little bit experimental here and creative. So when you don't have the need for native developers anymore, you can start to bridge the gap between mobile and web. So you can share all the knowledge between web and mobile, and the front-end engineers can use the same technology that they were used to use on the web, state management and test runners and so on. They can use that on the mobile platform as well. And if your developers already know JavaScript and you let them, then you just let them build what you want to build. So So in our case, we didn't need to hire new engineers really. We could just leverage the knowledge that we already had in the organization. And I've seen many engineers coming from a web background, and they might have a little bit React knowledge or no React knowledge, but they managed to get up to speed really easy, just within a couple of days. So yeah, I think the main reason why a cross-functional organization like this is actually possible is because the context switching is not that high. I mean, of course, if you would have developers that are really eager to learn new languages and are fast to get up to speed and so on, probably would also technically be possible by not using React Native or any other JavaScript technology for building mobile apps. I also would like to add that sharing code between web and mobile is possible. I think that's an interesting topic for many people that would like to build both a mobile app and also a web app at the same time. However, I have very little experience with that. The problem that I can see is that the primitives are very differently. Like how the view primitives in React Native is very differently from HTML. So I think your UI would be very hard to actually port over. There is probably or I know there is some tools that automates this for you, but I have not used it, so I cannot recommend it. But what I could recommend, if you would like to take this approach, is probably to reuse as much business logic as possible. So state managements and other side effects or side effects handling modules that you built, and then just duplicate the UI, but reuse the business logic. So the ecosystem in React is very mature. It combines the largest package repositories in the industry, and you can use the most popular JavaScript libraries that your developers are already familiar with. So again, like state management libraries, like Redux and Mobex or what have you, and Jest as test runners. And there is also a very high chance that the UI that you want to build is already exists as a component, and you can just pull it down and use it immediately. You don't have to spend any time developing it. And many NPM libraries are anyways just wrappers around native CocoaPods or Gradle packages. So if you don't find what you're looking for and you have some previous native developer experience, then you can easily expose your own custom bridge and wrap the native library that you're already familiar to use and that you know how it works and you know the API of that particular library very well. I think I have bridged maybe 2 or 3 native modules so far in my career in building apps with React Native over the 3+ years. So I think it's very rarely that you're gonna run into actually breaching anything. Maybe there is some custom small stuff, but like a whole library, I don't think you will find yourself doing. So I also want to talk a little bit about the community, because I think that's important when you choose a technology. So the React Native community has over 2,000 contributors. It's very active and they're really top of issue handling. And I think this has been improved the last, I would say, 7 or 8 months. So I think it looks very promising right now compared to how it was some time ago. So the project is following a monthly release cycle. So there's always new. You can make sure that there will be new releases fixing the problems that you might face. And they also the Facebook community recently also removed some native core modules out of React Native into the communities. I think this invites more people to come on board and help out, and also keeps down the final binary size of your project a little bit because there is less features out of the box. And I think it's very promising as well that Facebook is actually dogfooding their own products. It gives us engineers some trust, and we don't have to worry as much what the future beholds in terms of stabilities for the framework. So this is a great feature when you build mobile apps with JavaScript. So it's almost true. I mean, you have to initially compile your project, and when you want to run your app. And if you have any native changes, you always have to recompile your project. But most of the time, you're working on the JavaScript side, and when you change something, then the changes will be immediately reflected. So I think this instant feedback is a huge time saver and lets your developers iterate fast on building UIs. Oh, sorry, that was a little bit too quick there. So I also know that there is tricks in native app development to speed up development. Like on iOS, you can prototype your UI in Storyboard, for example. I think with Swift UI now there is this live preview, and so it's great to see that coming to native app development. But I still find myself recompiling my native projects more often compared to when I build with React Native. So the React Native framework has a very low size out of the box. That's why it was possible for us to integrate React Native into an already existing native app without skyrocketing the bundle size of the app, right? So because it's so lightweight, that's exactly why we can integrate it. And an example of this would be, let's say, when the user logs in, you actually want to display two different, maybe not two different apps, but two different versions of the app. So one native app or one React Native app. But it could also be feature-based. It could be that you have a feature A, for example, and you want to say that, okay, 50% of my users gonna see 50B instead, or feature B instead, so you do some sort of A/B testing. So to do such a thing is really straightforward, actually. So there's two things you just have to know about. So technically how it works is that you have to define the location for where your JavaScript bundle is served. So if you do in development mode, then the JavaScript bundle is always served on a local host. But when the app is actually a binary, then the bundle will be stored on the file system and read from the file system. The second thing you need to do is to render the React Native app in your native app. So on iOS, there is something called RCT root view that you have to instantiate, and that will be the main view that you will assign to the native view controller to display the whole React Native app. So it's basically just wrapped in one view, one native view element. And on Android, you would have to create an activity that extends from a React activity class, and then you can launch that activity as a new intent. Wire updates. This is really huge. I've seen great power with this feature feature for us. So we all know that releasing a new version can be very cumbersome. You need to wait for the app to be approved or released to the store, and this is especially true for iOS. And you also need to wait for the users to actually download the new app. So if you have some new feature you want them to use, or you're solving some bug, there might be some delay from when the bug is fixed or the feature is actually built until it's reflected for the user. So wire update is great here because it lets your team move very fast. So it turns out there is some sort of loophole here in the stores that lets you serve the JavaScript on the fly. So there is a code push call, or there's a service called code push from Microsoft that lets you upload your JavaScript bundle to the cloud, and then you just distribute it to all of your users instantly. So if you don't have a problem with Microsoft having like a minified version of your JavaScript, then I think this is a great feature to use. So this lets you, again, fix bugs and deploy features really fast. I see it as like a hot fixing. The hot fixing concept from the web brought into mobile. But still, if you have any native changes, you cannot go through code push here, or you cannot simply just update the JavaScript bundle. You need to go through the store. So a bit about the UI paradigm. I think that's where the biggest difference is between native app development and React Native development. So the first time when I had to build something on the native side, I built something like this. I had a simple box and some button, and I wanted to increment some stuff inside of the box. So it turned out that it's actually quite very different from how it looks like in React Native. So mainly this, like the imperative style versus the declarative style. So a little disclaimer here, the battle seems to have been settled around imperative versus declarative since Swift UI is coming to iOS, and there is also a couple of React-like libraries on Android. However, this new UI paradigms is not yet industry standard, and if they are becoming an industry standard, then they would be even better, for then native mobile app developers can transition even faster into React Native, and the other way around is true as well. So out of the box, it will look like something on this on iOS. Android is a little bit different since you declare your UI elements as XML. So it probably looks a little bit similar to React Native in that case, and then you bind the elements in your view class. And the point I'm trying to make here is not that in React land you never find yourself, or that is the point. In React land, you never find yourself instantiating or binding objects and then mutating them directly. And this is not about which approach is best and saves most lines of code. It's just the fact that React takes a declarative approach for describing your UI. And it reads much better, in my opinion. So on the React side here, as we can see to the right, it looks like sort of XML, but it's actually 100% JavaScript still. It's called JSX, so it sugars your function calls, but it's still JavaScript under the hood. It would be very unfair to say that declarative APIs are better than imperative APIs based on this comparison. But I think that the concept of children in React, which I will talk about more later, and the declarative way of describing UI, composition plays extremely well. So React forces you to always build components that describes your UI, and part of designing the components, you have to think about reusability and composability. So this is like in the core of React paradigm, and that's why I really enjoy to build UI with this paradigm. I think it's a great fit. And I'm happy to see that other platforms are adapting it. Another thing about the UI paradigm here is the reactivity part in React. So React gives you a powerful reactivity model, and you don't have to think about data binding, for example, callbacks, delegations, and notifications, and observable patterns, and all this. So here to the left, as we can see, we are at the bottom when you want to handle the... Ooh, have I been blocking this the whole time? Well, sorry. I have to move a little bit. So yes, as we can see, the handle button method here, when we call that, we're reaching into this object and like imperatively describing how our view should look like for every update, which is very contrary to React, where we have the same handle button method, and when it's invoked, it will call a setState API that returns a new copy of the state and then re-renders all the child nodes in the tree. So data always flows unidirectionally in React, top to bottom, not the other way around. You can communicate the other way around with passing callbacks and so on, but when you do, as a result of a state change, the data never flows backwards. And I used a class component here to represent my view in React, because I used a class on iOS, but you can also represent UI as pure functions in React. That was that connection. All right. Sorry about that. All right, we're back. Nobody is hurt. So maybe I have to speed up a little bit now. Lost some valuable seconds there. So another thing is what's called Flexbox layout module. I really do enjoy to work with this module for positioning and controlling my UI. So when you style components in React Native, it looks like you're using CSS, but React Native is using something called Yoga. It's an engine which lets you use a subset of CSS, mainly the Flexbox, to position and style elements using JavaScript. So in Flexbox world, we have a model that lets you specify the X and Y axis of how the elements should float, and then we can control how much space it should take up around or in between. There is, of course, more like a larger set of APIs here in Flexbox, but that's mainly the basic principles. It's very similar to how you use a stack view on iOS or the linear layout on Android. The terminology is a bit different, but it's the same principles. So remember when I mentioned children before in React? This is a very trivial example, but as you can see, we have this function here, very nice component, and it takes in children. So I like to see children as dark matter. I know it's there, but I really don't understand what it is. And then when we invoke our component here, very nice component, we pass in a set of children. It can be one child, two children, it can be squares, it could be triangles or spheres or whatever. It doesn't care. React don't care. Just like pass in whatever you want, and I will spit it out. So this is like really the fundamental building block for achieving composition in React, which I earlier talked about. So of course, there is drawbacks to React Native as well. So this is not meant to scare away people from using React Native, but everything has a trade-off, and this is just some negative aspects that I've been experiencing and reflecting about. So yeah, why would you not use React Native? It's not 100% JavaScript. React Native requires native knowledge, and the more native knowledge you have, the better. You still need to use Xcode and Android Studio to build and configure your projects, and it definitely takes time to get used to those environments. And also, when you perform React Native upgrades, it can be very cumbersome. It's not that easy as just bumping a npm version all the time. Like sometimes you need to look over your Gradle and so on. And again, if you want to bridge something, you need to know the native SDK. Another thing is platform inconsistency. Since React Native is calling native platform modules to render your views, so they will have the look and feel consistently to the platform they run on. This also means that sometimes you find that identical attributes or styling attributes that you pass down behaves differently because the style properties has a different meaning, depending on which platform it's being rendered on. So of course you can fix this by doing some simple branching, like check which platform the user is on and then pass some other style attributes, but it's not always that pleasant and can be a little bit time consuming. It's also single threaded, so I did talk about the main thread and the JavaScript thread before, so I guess it's not entirely true it's single threaded, but you don't have any fine granular control here. So it's not really a problem since the performance is really good in React Native anyway. But I can see that how it restricts certain developers and forces developers to learn how to do performance single-threaded programming. So maybe one day we have an easy and robust API for multi-threading in React Native, and together with the new Fabric API, which I mentioned briefly before, we could see more performance-heavy apps being built with React Native, like games and so on. So most performance issues I've experienced has always been related to just not writing really careful JavaScript code or not using React very, very optimally. So I would not hesitate to use React Native because you have any performance concerns. Another thing is also if it's really important for you and your business that you have access and control to the latest SDK features, then it would not be so good to use React Native because you would really rely on third-party libraries to update and reflect the latest SDK features or changes. So you would have to in React Native you would have to maintain a custom module yourself for that case. So yeah, it's reaching the end of my talk here. So where to go from here? I think if you like any of these benefits that I mentioned, and you think the React Native would be good for your organization and product, then definitely give it a go. If you like partially of what I mentioned here, perhaps other tools using JavaScript to build mobile applications would be a good fit because some of these traits really cross-pollinates over to other frameworks as well. So I think the takeaway here is that JavaScript is widely used and web technologies are advanced and mobile devices are fast today. So don't build a native app if you really don't have to do it. And yeah, unless you're building an iOS app using Swift because Swift is awesome. So that's me. And please say hi on Twitter, follow me on Medium. If you want to use React Native or are using React Native and you want to better understand some of the performance issues and how you can work around it, I have a blog article called Profiling and Performance Optimization in React Native. I also walk through how to profile your app. And the talk I mentioned before from my colleague about the journey where we integrated a new React Native app into an old native app. That whole talk is on YouTube called Strangling Legacy with React Native. So I also put a link there. So I guess these slides will be shared somewhere at some point. So, but yeah, you can always reach out to me and I will send the links to you as well. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen to me and I hope you learned something new. We also will do a Q&A now, as I understood. So if you have any questions.
So there's this company called Expo, which seems to more and more integrate into this React Native environment. What is the future of this Expo company? Is it somehow overtaking React Native? What is the plan?
Yes, I never used it, but I have understood that it's really a great productivity tool because you don't have to deal with this native side as much. But I think there is the drawback there that you can only use the libraries that lives within this ecosystem. That's why you have the possibility to eject your app out of the Expo, which some organizations does at some point. I also know that they have this very handy feature where you can like produce or generate a QR code with all the latest JavaScript changes. So basically the whole JavaScript bundle, and then you can just scan it and you can see the latest version of your app. But I also saw that yesterday on Twitter that some guy posted some experimental library for achieving the same without using Expo. So yeah, I'm not sure actually what Expo beholds for React Native in the future. I think it's a great tool, and especially if you don't want to ever deal with the native side at all, then it seems to be a great tool. But I have not used it, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I can answer your question. I used Expo, and I think it's good for small projects. Like if you need a form for an event like that, it would be like really easy and fast to code in Expo. But if you want some advanced stuff, you would find that Expo would limit you. Like they have a lot of problem with Bluetooth and some other native stuff. Like they have like an RFC. What people want in Expo, and there's a lot of unsolved APIs. So like you need to find if your project would use this API or not. I would like during this talk, I asked my friend about the one slide with reactivity and this comparison of iOS and React Native code.
Yeah.
And he told me like that it's for purpose of presentation is good, but people don't code like that.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So it's I mean depends. Like in the project that I inherited at our company, people definitely coded a bit like that.
Okay.
So I think for me it was more to like I think I answered. I had a question when I was building with React Native, like how is it? How do you even start if you want to build UI on the native side? So I really wanted to like showcase the out of the box scenario here. But I know that of course there is you use reactivity libraries and so on to achieve the similar or if not the same. But in React Native, it's built in by default. So that was more
I understand.
What I wanted to showcase. And so like if there is people that has absolutely zero background, then I wanted to show them what it will look like, what they are putting themselves into, and then you can always create abstractions for there or use other abstractions, of course.
But my main question is like I was asking like 2 years ago to myself, like what's the future of React Native? Because like I think that this framework is not growing so fast. Like I think that it's in some stage where it's like not even Facebook don't even care about it so much. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
maybe you have different perspective than me.
I
saw a lot of big projects in Poland like created in React Native, like big applications, but I think that they now regret it.
Yeah, so I think there is many companies who regret their decisions, and there's many companies that are continuously sharing on their decisions. I mean, it's really hard here to create, I think, one product that can sort of rule them all scenarios and situations. So what I mentioned before was that I did notice, like 8 months ago, something like that there was not as many new releases, and the community seemed a little bit cold. But that definitely has changed now, and Facebook have took an active approach to change this. So by moving core modules out to the open source community and so on, which I mentioned, and also with the whole new initiative of creating this new fabric architecture, where I mentioned the JSI, which is the code name for the new JavaScript runtime that will replace the bridge. This seems to be a massive implementation that will span over 1 or 2 years. So I really have a hard time to see that the React Native is dying off. But of course, there is so many great tools coming up, Flutter and Ionic, and not that Ionic is coming up, but it's also very mature. PWA is getting more and more robust. There's more, you have more, can leverage more APIs now to communicate with the device than you could like 3 years ago. So I think it's just, right now it's just about helping each other and learning from each other and pushing technology forward. So I really think React Native is here to stay. I can only see it getting better and more robust for every month. Yeah.